It was midday when Ethan arrived home. He had been out all night and was now swimming in one of Caleb's oversized t-shirts. As the front door swung open, Henderson, the family's steadfast butler, was waiting in the entryway, his expression a mixture of concern and relief. He announced that lunch had been prepared. Ethan, momentarily flustered by the man's gentle eyes, could only manage a quiet affirmation. Henderson's gaze followed him into the dining room, where a table was laden with a light, nourishing broth and lean grilled chicken. Ethan settled into a chair and looked at the older man, who seemed distressed on his behalf, commenting on how starved he must be. Ethan sighed softly and asked after Caleb. Henderson's expression turned slightly rueful as he explained that the Cold War had settled into a tense, icy standoff. Ethan had figured as much. After the restorative meal, Ethan went to his room to study. As dusk began to settle, he sent a text to Caleb, inquiring if he would be home for dinner. The reply was brief, stating he would not be back until late. Ethan acknowledged the message with a simple emoji and put his phone away. That evening, he ate another warm meal by himself before returning to the solitude of his bedroom. Around 11, Henderson appeared with a glass of milk, asking if he was still awake. Ethan accepted the glass, explaining he would sleep later. He had, after all, summoned Caleb back for the night. It wouldn't do to be asleep when he arrived, leaving Caleb to listen to his snores. Henderson, misinterpreting his diligence, was moved by his dedication to his studies. Ethan felt a prickle of shame. He wasn't studying, he was on watch duty for Caleb. He politely saw the old butler out of the room. It was nearly midnight when a faint sound from the corridor finally broke the silence. His internal radar activated, and he rose and opened his door. A click echoed in the hall as he came face to face with Caleb, who stood a few meters away, his hand on his own doorknob. Hearing the noise, Caleb turned. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Caleb's fingers retracted from the doorknob, his gaze lingering on Ethan for a couple of seconds before he asked why he was still up. Ethan explained that he was on watch duty. The self-proclaimed commander, returning late, was now being held accountable online. He said this as he walked over, asking if Caleb's work was finished. Caleb replied that it was almost done as he opened his door. Ethan followed him into the master bedroom. Caleb walked to the bed, loosening his collar and placing his hands on his belt before turning to look at Ethan, announcing his intention to take a shower. Ethan processed this for a second, then stepped forward with a knowing look. He was no longer the naive boy who only admired from afar. As he reached for Caleb's belt, his hand was caught in a firm grip. Caleb's large palm held him securely. When he looked up, he saw the deep intensity in Caleb's eyes. Caleb asked him what he was doing. Ethan, certain he was reading the signals correctly, asked if Caleb didn't mean for him to help him undress. Caleb took a slow breath and gently chided him, clarifying that he had meant for Ethan to give him some privacy. Mortified, Ethan ducked his head, his fingertips awkwardly picking at the smooth edge of the belt, admitting he might have made a mistake. Despite his words, his hands remained stubbornly on the belt. Caleb gently pried his fingers off one by one, praising his commitment to his watch duty, comparing him to a turnip with deep roots. Ethan, blushing, shyly retracted his hand. Caleb picked up a change of clothes, glanced at the time, and reminded him that he should be going back to bed. Ethan condemned the suggestion, pointing out how long he had been waiting up without so much as a word of acknowledgement from the commander. Caleb stared at him for a long moment, then a soft chuckle escaped him. He asked what it was exactly that his Ethan wanted as a reward. Ethan pursed his lips and looked at him expectantly, feeling that such things should be figured out on one's own. They held each other's gaze for a few seconds. Caleb's hand, which had been hanging at his side, moved. He raised it and pressed it to the back of Ethan's neck. The pad of his thumb rubbed the delicate skin there twice, a gesture akin to petting a cat. The slightly rough texture of his fingertips against the sensitive flesh sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. His eyelashes fluttered as he looked up at Caleb, asking what this was. Caleb gently kneaded the back of his neck with his palm, murmuring that he was just tilling the soil for his little turnip. He continued this for 5 full minutes, until the entire turnip was soft and pliant. Then Caleb escorted the turnip out of the bedroom, placing him just outside the door and telling him to go hibernate in his cellar. Ethan, standing at the door, praised the commander's extensive knowledge of agriculture. Caleb's lip twitched as he retorted that it was necessary for planting turnips. Ethan agreed that made sense. Content, he returned to his room, wishing Caleb a good night. The next day, Caleb was gone for work early again. Ethan stayed home with his books, taking a break to search for information about Sterling Enterprises. Several financial blogs were hyping up news of the company's impending bankruptcy, urging investors to sell their shares immediately. These public deceptions were undoubtedly mixed with the work of the Ashworth family. Ethan methodically clicked the report button on each article, determined that they wouldn't get away with spreading false information. After his crusade, he returned to his quiet studies. It seemed Caleb had made a promise to come home, as he didn't spend another night at the office for the next few days. Though he arrived late and left early, he consistently came home to tend to his turnip. The rumors about Sterling Enterprises grew more intense, but neither Declan Ashworth nor his sister had reached out to him yet. Ethan estimated that things had not yet reached their final, critical stage. 5 or 6 days passed in this manner. Ethan kept his usual vigil at home, waiting for Caleb to return and perform their nightly ritual before he went to bed. But one night, Caleb returned exceptionally late. It wasn't until after 1 in the morning that car headlights swept across the front of the house. Ethan glanced out the window, then opened his door and left his room. He met Caleb at the top of the stairs. Caleb looked even more weary than he had in the preceding days. When he raised his eyes and saw Ethan, he paused, then walked over and squeezed Ethan's neck. The pressure was light, just 2 quick squeezes before he retracted his hand, remarking that Ethan was still up. Ethan hummed in agreement and followed him back toward the bedroom, trying to decipher his expression. He commented that their commander seemed particularly tired tonight. Caleb's lips twitched slightly as he pushed his bedroom door open, asking if it was because he hadn't tilled the soil for his turnip yet. Ethan reached out a helping hand, pinching his shoulder and offering a reversal of roles. His shoulders were stiff beneath Ethan's palm. He kneaded them twice before his hands were lifted away. Caleb turned around and told him to go back to sleep. He looked utterly exhausted, as if he could fall asleep standing up. Ethan withdrew his hand and wished him a good night. The next day was a work day. Having stayed up too late the night before, Ethan slept until 9. He got up for breakfast, and as he passed Caleb's bedroom, he noticed the door was still closed. Normally, Caleb left his bedroom door open whenever he went to work. Ethan paused, then pushed the door open. The curtains were drawn, casting the room in dim light. The bed was occupied. Caleb hadn't gotten up yet. An inexplicable tension gripped Ethan's heart. He walked quickly to the bedside. Caleb's eyes were closed tightly, his brow slightly furrowed, and his breath came out in hot puffs. Ethan quickly reached out and touched Caleb's forehead. The heat radiating from his skin was alarming. His heart skipped a beat as he realized Caleb had a fever. Caleb's eyelashes fluttered, and he opened his eyes. They were dark as ink, clouded with a wave of heat that washed over Ethan. He breathed a sigh of relief. At least he was conscious. He stood up and told Caleb to lie still while he called for medical help. It was 20 minutes later when Dr. Evans arrived. Henderson followed him into the master bedroom, his face a mask of remorse, lamenting that he had assumed Caleb had already left for the day. Ethan sat by the bed, holding a glass of warm water with a straw for Caleb, who was firmly tucked under the covers. Caleb, a straw in his mouth, looked at Dr. Evans with a hint of protest on his pale face. The doctor spoke, suggesting he get a look at Mr. Sterling. Ethan removed the cup and moved aside. Caleb pushed himself up, his flushed face making his pursed, water-stained lips look starkly red. Dr. Evans sat down with a serious expression, noting the high fever and asking if he felt unwell. Caleb calmly replied that he was fine. Ethan shot him a look, reminding him not to use polite formalities when seeing a doctor. He pointed out that Dr. Evans was not there as a social guest. Caleb glanced at Ethan, then exhaled a hot breath as his deep voice finally detailed his symptoms. The consultation was finally on track. Ethan stayed by his side for a while until his other phone vibrated. He glanced down at a call from Declan Ashworth. With the tense atmosphere at home, he had been using his old account more frequently to keep tabs on the Ashworths. It had been quiet until now, but of course, they would make a move just as Caleb fell ill. It was as if the virus and their machinations went hand in hand. Ethan glanced at Caleb, then took his phone and stepped out of the bedroom, closing the door behind him. He walked a few meters away and answered. Declan's voice was as smooth as ever as he asked if Ethan had heard the news about Mr. Sterling. Ethan confirmed that he had. With rumors flying everywhere, he was neither deaf nor blind. Declan then inquired about Caleb's recent activities. Ethan answered truthfully that he had been very busy. Before he could elaborate, the master bedroom door opened again. Dr. Evans and Henderson came out, closing the door behind them. Their conversation drifted down the hall, about how the illness was caused by a combination of overwork and immense mental pressure, a sickness of the heart manifesting as a high fever. The words were perfectly audible through the phone's microphone. Ethan simply remained silent. After a few seconds of silence on the other end, Declan let out a light, cheerful laugh, remarking on what a surprise it was. He then instructed Ethan to continue keeping an eye on Caleb and to report anything. Ethan agreed, knowing that when Caleb made his comeback, he would be the first to deliver the good news to Declan. The call ended just as Dr. Evans finished his instructions to Henderson. Seeing Ethan return, Henderson asked if he had been on the phone. Ethan replied concisely that he was sending away a plague god. Henderson nodded thoughtfully, musing that metaphysics could also be good for curing diseases. Dr. Evans left to get the prescription filled, and the cook downstairs prepared some porridge. Once it was ready, Ethan stood over Caleb, supervising him with a glare as he ate. His gaze was so intense that Caleb paused midway through the bowl and met his eyes. Ethan asked if it was difficult to swallow. Caleb glanced at the straw in the water glass beside him and quickly finished the porridge, denying any difficulty. Ethan took the empty bowl and, on his way out, met Henderson coming up to collect it. Henderson took the bowl and suggested that Ethan should get some rest. Ethan agreed, but before leaving, he turned to look at Caleb, who was leaning against the headboard. A sliver of light from the half-drawn curtains illuminated the room, enveloping Caleb's face in shadow. His expression was calm, his eyelids casting a dark shade beneath them. Ethan was suddenly reminded of the night Caleb had returned from a 10-hour flight, standing at the door covered in travel dust, looking at him in silence. A surge of emotion rose in his chest. Henderson had already gone downstairs with the bowl. Ethan turned back into the room and closed the door. Caleb, who had been about to lie down, asked what was wrong. Ethan skillfully lifted the quilt and slipped in beside him. At the same time, he reached out and pulled Caleb back under the covers, leaning in with bright eyes and announcing he would sleep with him. Caleb, pulled along by his momentum, lowered his eyes and asked if Ethan was playing doctor today. Ethan corrected him, saying he was Nurse Ethan. A faint smile seemed to touch Caleb's lips before he stretched out a hand to push him away, telling him to get out. When Ethan asked why, Caleb whispered that it was contagious. Ethan slapped his hand away with a scornful smile, declaring that such words were useless. Today he would use force. With that, he burrowed into Caleb's arms, hugging him tightly. The breath falling on the top of his head was hot. Caleb tried to push him away twice but failed. He finally gave up, closing his eyes. His Adam's apple bobbed as his faint voice fell, murmuring Ethan's name. Ethan, nestled in his arms, replied sweetly and instructed him not to talk, but to sleep. He then raised his eyes to meet Caleb's. There seemed to be a shimmer in those dark depths. One look told him Caleb was not sleepy yet. Ethan helplessly reached out and covered his eyelids with his hand, commanding him to sleep. Beneath his palm, Caleb's red lips moved, questioning the command. Ethan pinched his lips shut, chiding him for his feverish babble. Caleb finally grew quiet and closed his eyes, not attempting to push him away again. In the dim room, Ethan was held by Caleb, feeling the intense heat emanating from him. After a few minutes, Caleb's consciousness seemed to drift away. His body relaxed slightly, and his head rested on Ethan's shoulder. Ethan gently patted the hand on his back, asking if he was uncomfortable. A deep voice confirmed that he was, followed by a pause, and then an assurance that it was okay. The first reaction was usually the truth. Ethan patted Caleb's back knowingly. Even in his weakened state, the commander was still trying to be tough. It made Ethan adore him even more. He didn't know how long they lay like that, but Caleb's hot breath eventually spread across his shoulder. There was no air conditioning in the room, and both of them were under the covers. Ethan was burning up, drenched in sweat. He shifted, pulling his upper body slightly away. As he moved his leg, a muffled groan came from beside his neck. He opened his eyes wide. Their commander, even with a fever, was still so vigorous. And he seemed to be getting hotter. Ethan's face suddenly felt fiery. He reasoned that Caleb was still a patient and mercifully prepared to withdraw. But as soon as he moved, the arms around his waist tightened, pulling him back. His heart pounded against the surrounding heat wave. He called out Caleb's name softly. Caleb didn't wake up but hugged him tighter as if by instinct, burying his face in Ethan's shoulder. It was hot, so very hot. Ethan trembled, grabbing Caleb's sleeve. The thin pajama fabric offered little barrier, making every sensation acutely clear. He stared at Caleb's profile for a long time. The commander was a patient. He couldn't let him be so uncomfortable. His face flushed, his heart thumping. Ethan raised his leg to move again. The smooth fabric of his pajama pants bunched up. The hot breath on his shoulder suddenly grew heavier. The hand on his waist gradually tightened, then abruptly paused. The palm loosened its grip and instead pinched his arm. Ethan stopped moving and looked over. Caleb was awake, his head raised. Their eyes met. His were dark and filled with fire, and his bright red lips were dry. Under that intense gaze, Ethan froze, feeling as if he had been carried to the entrance of a wolf's den. His face was still flushed as he nestled in the crook of Caleb's elbow, asking if he felt uncomfortable. Caleb propped himself up with one hand, a stray lock of hair falling over his sharp brow. He pinned Ethan with his other arm, looking down at him and telling him not to cause trouble. Nonsense, he was obviously being so dedicated. Ethan lay back on the pillow, his eyes moist from the steam, announcing that today, he was the full-service nurse Ethan. The sweat soaked their clothes and the quilt, creating a humid heat in the bed. In the dimly lit bedroom, Caleb was propped up above him. They were looking at each other when two sharp knocks sounded at the door. Both of them turned their heads. The door opened, and Henderson appeared, holding a tray of medicine. The scene that greeted him was unexpected. Henderson froze, the medicine bowl rattling in his hands, before letting out a soft "oh." The door was quickly closed again, the old butler disappearing behind it. Silence reigned in the room for a moment. Ethan exhaled a hot breath, turned to look at the man above him, and reached out to pat his chest, feigning calmness as he asked if it was time for his medicine. Caleb paused, then pushed himself up. He knelt over Ethan, facing him. Ethan's eyes drifted downward, so intuitive, so powerful. His leg was suddenly squeezed hard, a clear. He moved his gaze upwards to meet the fierce look in Caleb's eyes, which commanded him to look away. But the stern face was flushed with sickness, robbing it of some of its fierceness. Ethan pursed his lips obediently. Caleb stood up and walked to the bathroom. As he pushed open the door with one hand, Ethan offered a warm reminder to take a hot shower. The figure at the door paused, his deep voice sounding as if it had been scorched as he said he knew. The bathroom door slammed shut, cutting off the view. Ethan lay on the bed for a while, then lifted the quilt and got up to go back to his own room for a quick shower as well. When he emerged, Caleb was no longer in the bedroom. Ethan walked downstairs and saw him sitting in the living room, drinking his medicine. The old housekeeper stood nearby, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and embarrassment, as if his interruption had cost them $1 billion deal. Ethan shyly estimated that it might indeed have been worth several billion. On the coffee table, Caleb looked composed, but when he heard footsteps on the stairs, he glanced up from behind the rim of the bowl. His eyes were sharp and deep. Ethan met his gaze, and the scene from earlier flashed through his mind. He couldn't dwell on it. The commander was still a patient. He composed himself and walked over. A collection of medicine bottles was piled on the coffee table. He sat next to Caleb and looked through them, noting there were so many and asking if he felt better. A voice from the side confirmed that he did. Henderson added that sweating would help. Ethan looked over thoughtfully. Caleb's radar flickered, and his gaze shot towards him. He looked deeply into his eyes and said his name. Ethan quickly switched off his late-night thoughts and said softly that he was just thinking about covering him with more blankets. Caleb sneered, asking if he was some kind of yellow emperor. Ethan buried his head, picking through the medicine. What an apt description. Henderson took a step back, trying to be inconspicuous, wondering where the emperor character had come from. Caleb's high fever didn't break until the next day. The following day, Henderson called the medical team back, and Caleb was moved to a private room upstairs for an intravenous drip. Ethan didn't touch a book for 2 days, staying by the side of their fragile commander. After the 4 was set up, the medical staff left, leaving only Ethan and Caleb in the room. Ethan picked up Caleb's free hand. The veins on the back were prominent, the knuckles clear, slender, and elegant. He wondered if their commander had lost weight. Caleb let him hold his hand, remarking that he couldn't feel anything, and then asked for his tablet. Ethan narrowed his eyes, asking what he was doing. Caleb remained silent. Ethan understood. He had to keep an eye on the company again. But in Caleb's current state, not keeping an eye on it would only make him more anxious. He complied and got the tablet. Caleb took it and looked down without a word. Ethan watched him. His expression was indifferent, but his jaw was tense, his eyes focused, filled with a deep obsession. It was as if he was fighting a desperate battle, as if missing this one chance would lead to an irreversible outcome. Ethan reviewed the plot in his mind. A month after Caleb's birthday seemed to be when the Ashworth family made their first major move, marking the beginning of Sterling Enterprises' decline. It was good that he was marshaling his energy to avoid the fate set in the original story. As he was thinking, the tablet in front of him was closed. Caleb closed his eyes, tilted his head back against the headboard, and murmured, as if to himself, whether it was God's will. Ethan looked at him, asking what he meant. Caleb didn't speak again, only a faint, bitter smile playing on his lips. At this critical juncture, when he was supposed to be breaking the plot, he had fallen seriously ill with a high fever. It was as if God was telling him he couldn't escape his destiny. Ethan looked at the corner of his cold, self-deprecating mouth. Was he really getting emotional at noon? For a moment, neither of them spoke. Caleb's Adam's apple moved, a prominent, sexy feature on his flushed neck. Ethan paused, then couldn't resist reaching out a finger to press against the three-dimensional bauble. He agreed that it was all God's will. Caleb's eyes snapped open, looking at him intently. Ethan touched his Adam's apple and spoke earnestly, reciting the old saying that when heaven is about to confer a great responsibility on a man, it must first test his will and strain his muscles. He finished with an expectant sigh, telling Caleb he was destined for greatness. Ethan retracted his hand, reassuring him not to worry, that their commander would be rewarded. After all, he was kind-hearted and possessed great talents. Great achievements were sure to come early. He smiled. Caleb cast an insightful look at him. Ethan's earnest face met his gaze, his eyes filled with purity and calmness. They stared at each other for a long time until his eyes grew sore and he couldn't help but blink. He lamented his loss. Caleb's veins throbbed as he asked who was competing with him. Ethan reached out and pushed his tablet away, suggesting they not play with that anymore. He had just installed a tower defense game for him. Caleb lowered his eyes to look at the colorful radishes on the screen. He was silent for a moment, then suddenly smiled, reached out, and tapped start. Fortunately, God's will did not keep Caleb like this for too long. After 2 days of infusions, his fever finally broke, and his energy was mostly restored. The next morning, when Ethan went downstairs for breakfast, he saw Caleb looking like his usual self and cheerfully sang out a congratulatory message. There was a slight hoarseness in his voice. As soon as he finished speaking, both Caleb and Henderson looked at him. Caleb asked why his voice was hoarse. Ethan could only croak in response. The three of them fell silent. Caleb took a deep breath and put a hand to his forehead. Henderson asked in shock if Ethan was sick too. 20 minutes later, Dr. Evans was summoned to the house again. He looked at the two men who had swapped places in and out of the sickbed and couldn't help but sigh about his third visit to the cottage. Ethan, adhering to a certain rigor, gently corrected that the saying wasn't used that way. Dr. Evans said he knew. He was just overwhelmed with emotion and couldn't think of anything else to say. Caleb told him to just examine Ethan. Dr. Evans got serious, sitting down by the bed to begin his inquiries. Ethan hadn't felt much when he woke up, but the signs of illness were now making themselves known. His throat was sore, his voice was hoarse, and his nose was stuffy. Dr. Evans examined him for a while and concluded that he had a weak constitution and was prone to catching a cold when exposed to alternating hot and cold temperatures, especially after sweating. Caleb, who was sitting nearby, suddenly raised his eyes and asked if Ethan had gone back to take a shower that day. Ethan was silent for a moment before admitting that he hadn't taken a hot one. Under Caleb's insightful gaze, he added guiltily that it was just to cool down. As everyone knew, a cool-down shower meant a cold shower. Caleb let out a dry laugh. He hadn't fully recovered from his illness, and his laugh had a buzzing quality. Ethan's eyes immediately shot back to him. A laugh? He didn't know who had insisted on pressing up against him. Otherwise, why would he have needed a cold shower? He also let out a buzzing laugh. The two of them buzzed at each other several times. Caleb looked at him steadily for 2 seconds, then was the first to look away. He turned, got a glass of water, and handed it over, telling him to stop making noise and drink something for his dry mouth. Ethan took the water and called a truce. The commander was quite observant, so he would let it slide. Dr. Evans left after prescribing medicine. Ethan lay in bed, feeling drowsy. After lunch, he started running a low fever and slept, sweating, through the afternoon. The curtains were drawn, and he drifted in a daze. He vaguely heard someone enter the room, touch his sweaty forehead, and then go to the bathroom. After a slight noise, a wet towel fell on his face and began to wipe it. Felt wonderful. He opened his eyes and saw a tall figure moving in front of him, asking why Commander Lou was there. A straw was put to his lips as the answer came, to defend the turnip. Ethan let him wipe his face and drank a few sips of hot water. Then he tilted his head and considerately shooed the man out, telling him that he was too delicate and frail and should go back and lie down. Frail? A sneer fell from above him. The towel covering his cheek paused and moved to cover his nose. Ethan felt his nose being pinched through the towel, and then he heard Caleb say coldly that he was fine. Fine, he would indulge his pride and stubbornness. The white turnip stopped making noise and was comfortably rubbed. His dark eyes narrowed slightly, and he rubbed his cheek against the towel. His face was quickly pushed back, and the wet towel was withdrawn. Caleb pulled up the quilt, told him to sleep, and then turned and walked out. The door opened, and light from the corridor streamed in. Ethan turned to look at Caleb's back as he stood at the door. His straight, broad shoulders were silhouetted against the light, an inexplicably reassuring sight. Click, the door closed softly. He buried himself in the quilt and closed his eyes, a warmth spreading across his face. The commander who defended the turnip. So handsome, he liked him so much. Ethan lay there all afternoon and woke in the evening. The dim light from outside filtered through the gaps in the curtains. He was a little hungry, so he lifted the quilt and got up. Probably because he had slept for too long and had a low fever, his mind felt groggy. He opened the door and called out Caleb's name. No one answered in the corridor. When he passed Caleb's bedroom, he glanced in. No one was there. He must be downstairs. He walked down the stairs, holding onto the handrail. Halfway down, he saw Caleb sitting in the living room, looking at a computer. His face was cold and focused. He seemed to have indeed recovered. Once the illness was gone, even the emo cloud that had settled between his eyebrows was mostly gone. Ethan watched for a moment and then let out a low cough. In the living room, Caleb's head snapped up. He raised a hand to close the computer, stood up, and walked over, asking why he was downstairs. Ethan said he was hungry. Henderson, who happened to be at the entrance to the dining room, turned and walked into the kitchen, calling for some porridge to be made for Ethan. Ethan poked his head around the corner, saying he wanted something with meat. He said this as he continued down the stairs. When there were 4 steps left, his foot suddenly missed its mark. The feeling of weightlessness came suddenly, and his heart leaped into his throat. A few steps away, Caleb seemed to react faster than he did. Before Ethan could recover from the sensation of falling, he was caught in a firm embrace, tight arms wrapped securely around his waist. He subconsciously threw his arm around Caleb's shoulders and tilted his head, dazed. Soft lips brushed against the side of his face and pressed against the corner of his mouth. The hand holding his waist trembled and suddenly froze. Their lips were pressed together at the corner, and for a moment, no one moved. Ethan took 2 seconds to process what was happening. He was kissing Caleb. His heart beat a few times faster, and his eyelashes trembled. A faint electric current seemed to run through the point where their lips touched, making his face heat up, and a sense of shame arose in his heart. Should he try to sneak closer? Just as he was contemplating this, the hand around his waist suddenly lifted him away. The warm touch on his lips disappeared, replaced by slightly chaotic breathing. Caleb hadn't moved him far, stopping just 2 centimeters away. This distance was tantalizingly close, yet achingly far. It was as if true desires were being revealed in the restraint, and ambiguity was breeding in their intertwined breaths. Ethan's hand on Caleb's shoulder tightened slightly. The slight pressure seemed to wake the other man up. The breath falling on his lips trembled. Then Caleb lowered his eyes, withdrew, and set him down in front of the stairs. With the distance widened, Ethan raised his head and looked at Caleb. His lips were pressed into a straight line, his eyes dark. He didn't know if it was because of the warm light, but the base of Caleb's ears seemed to be a little red. Ethan's face flushed. Their commander, it seemed, was a little innocent, but there was also a hidden aggression in that innocence. Like a chained beast, he wanted to rebelliously unlock his shackles and see what would happen. While he was lost in thought, there was a sound from the kitchen. The cook's voice carried from the kitchen into the dining room, announcing that the porridge had been simmering for a long time and was ready to be served. Just in time, Henderson said. Ethan's throat moved. The hand that had been on his waist withdrew and turned him around. From behind him came Caleb's voice, thick with unclear emotions, telling him to go and eat. After saying that, he raised his hand.